Part 3 of the Bush-Clinton mysterious envelope saga. My metaphor today is crime families. My goal is to analyze the similarities between the Appalachian mafia don's fiasco up in upstate New York back in 1957 when they were caught red-handed and the deep state Bush Sr. funeral while all the heads of the crime family assembled. All of this was in full public display. And quite frankly, it looked bad. But we are not here to rehash those glorious moments where they showed their true colors. No, we've already done that. Like I said, this is part 3 in the saga. So how are we going to start this out? I think we will start this conversation off with what are the people thinking? You see, I read all the comments on the 2 videos in part 1, part 2. I do read the comments. And I get the feeling that when Donald Trump walked into the funeral, the Americans felt like the boss had arrived. You know, like a mafia boss had walked in and he was going to show these fools who was in charge. And I mean, this was the overwhelming thought pattern that I was getting from the comments. So, did Trump expose this criminal cartel at the Bush funeral? I mean, did Donald Trump plan this out? I mean, with the envelopes and everything? Okay, we'll start this conversation with my opinion. And this is my opinion because I make videos. Not only do I make videos on political commentary, but I make other videos. And sometimes I make silly little short films. And I understand how hard it is to catch that moment. It's difficult. So, in a time like this, in this funeral fiasco, I go back to what Orson Welles said. And nobody can deny that Orson Welles was one of the greatest filmmakers of all times. And do you know what Orson Welles said? He said this. He said, the greatest things in movies are divine accidents. Let that sink in for a moment. Divine accidents. This is from the man who has created some of the greatest movies ever created. Orson Welles, quite frankly, a genius. He was a magician. That's what movies are. Illusions. So I really think, when I think about this funeral moment, and this is a big moment in America, I don't want anybody to downplay this moment in time because I am here to tell you this is one of those divine accidents on film. Maybe a divine accident in American history. And if you have the patience, I will dig deeper today and I will tell you why I think this footage is so important in American history. And no, it's not because some deep state operative with CIA connections went to meet his master in hell. No, the implications of this moment in time have nothing to do with a funeral. We're talking about criminal heads of state assembled in the public domain on full display for the unwashed masses to form opinions, to verify what they already know. Remember, nobody can teach you anything that you don't already know. I mean, how's that for old Greek philosophy? So, was this the moment that America figured out that these people are mafia dons, leaders of a criminal organization? That's what I got from the comments. Now remember, people have known this for a long time, but there has to be that moment, there has to be that special moment. And I'll call this that divine accident where they helped us out. And we got it on film. And people, not only in America, but folks all over the world, were able to see this gross display of uncouth arrogance where mafia dons fight for control of territory right in front of our eyes. I mean, Shakespeare would be peeing in his pants right now if he saw this. I mean, imagine what Shakespeare would think if he was able to watch this. So let's get back to my goal. Remember my original goal? To see the similarities. What do you mean? What the similarities? Okay, like mafia dons all assemble in upstate New York. You got that picture in your head? All these mafia dons. Okay, now get this picture. Deep state dons assembled at a deep state funeral. I mean, what is the biggest threat to a criminal enterprise? That is for all the dons to assemble in one place and get caught. Okay, let's make sure we have similarity one down pat. Okay, think of it. Mafia dons assemble to laugh, drink, and divvy up the loot. Seriously, I mean, that's what mafia people do. They charge a vigorish. All that vigorish and all that juice money adds up, and the dons have to split it up, divvy up the loot, and they all have to be in agreement. Now switch from the left part of your brain to the right part of your brain and picture this. Deep state mafia dons assemble to laugh, cackle, and rub the loot right in our damn faces. Caught in the act, on film, in full public display. So again, it's one thing for us to have a gut feeling that we know what's going on behind the curtain. But then you go to a totally different level. You're going to a totally new, different level when you get a visual confirming what your gut has already told you. Okay, let's go into similarity number 2. Mafia dons running in fear. You have to imagine, a lot of people don't know what happened up there in Appalachian, New York, when you had all these criminal mafia dons assembled in one place. They got caught. I think it was the New York Highway Patrol got suspicious, and and all these mafia dons were running out of the house. I think they were surrounded by a few state troopers, and they definitely did not want to get caught, all assembled in one place. So they all started running. A lot of them got caught and arrested. So you got that picture in your mind. The dons are caught, and there's a little bit of fear going on there. I mean, these are hardcore criminals, but they still have a little bit of fear. Okay, now again, switching from the inner part of your caveman brain to the frontal lobe, picture this. Deep state dons froze in fear. So, do you see any similarities between the heads of the organization here? They got the mysterious envelope, and the heads of the mafia families who got caught by the New York State Troopers. You see any similarities here? Because I certainly do. But let me make a special comment here before we get to the third and the most important similarity of all. Remember that. This third similarity that we're working up to, it is the most important of the whole picture. But I do have to make this special comment because it's not lost on me that I may be playing right into the hands of the people who think that Donald Trump got elected and was put in a position of power by a direct divine intervention by God himself. That they think that Trump is God's personal sheriff who will arrest the deep state organization. I got to make a statement here. That's not what I mean by a divine accident. The divine accident I'm talking about is like what Orson Welles mentioned, that when you're filming things, sometimes you think you're filming something, but not until later, when you're doing the editing, do you find out that was a divine accident. You didn't really plan on this. I don't think anybody really planned on showcasing this criminal organization all assembled in one location, and for us to analyze their emotions, their body language. I don't think anybody truly put this together or planned this. I mean, just like up there in upstate New York, I don't think that the FBI and the state troopers planned to catch the mafia dons. The mafia dons just made a mistake. They had all those fancy cars on the coming rolling into a town, and the state troopers got suspicious. I mean, what the hell's all these fancy cars coming into art? So they started to investigate. So when I talk about divine accidents, they're not planned out. Of course, in my opinion, they're not planned out. Well, we've made it to similarity number 3, and if you've made it this far, congratulations, because the scientists out there tell me that modern day humans have the attention span of a goldfish, and sometimes I wonder. So similarity number 3 is the most important. It ties all the dots together. You've got to remember back in 1957, when they caught all those mafia dons in one place, assembled. Why was that so important? A lot of the younger people, any younger generation watching this video up to this point, are probably confused. I mean, what was so important about that meeting? Well, up until that point, that divine accident that was caught not only in photography, but was documented in the newspapers. It was of national interest. Up until that point, guess what the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover tried to throw down the American people's throats? J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI refused to admit the existence of a nationwide criminal conspiracy, a nationwide criminal organization that went all the way from New York to Las Vegas to California, down to the tip of Florida, all the way down to Cuba, over to Italy. We're not only talking nationwide criminal organization, we're talking a worldwide criminal organization. And J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI denied the existence of this organization, which most Americans had already had a gut feeling existed when they went to any of their local illegal casinos, and when the bombs went off on certain cars in certain neighborhoods. I mean, most Americans already knew it, but it took a special occasion, a divine accident, where all the mafia dons came together in the public domain, and there it was, caught in full public display. Now, in this similarity, you don't even need the electrons to travel through your brain. I mean, it's no doubt that you realize today that the FBI refuses to admit a deep state 666 gang exists. I mean, how many times has that question been thrown to James Comey? Back when Comey was the head of the FBI, I remember him addressing this question all the time. Comey would say, "Oh, I know there's lots of people out there who say there's a deep state. Well, I just don't see it." See the similarities here? I mean, this deep state thing didn't come up till recently. Before Comey, no head of the FBI even had to address the question. But this deep state thing that's rolling through America today, it's so prevalent, it's so out there, that tells you something there, that James Comey had to come out and say, no, we don't see any evidence that a deep state even exists. Now you got to go back to 1950s when J. Edgar Hoover said, "Oh no, there's no nationwide conspiracy of mafia. No, it doesn't happen. No, it's not going on." They denied it back then, and they deny it today until a divine accident magically comes up, and they can no longer deny it. And that's why I say that you cannot downplay this moment in time. The American people have a visual here. It was confirmed to me in the part 1 and part 2 of this series. Oh, almost 1 million people watched this, and their buttons were pushed. Yes, they had many, many comments, and they were excited to see that the deep state was worried, that the deep state was in fear. We got a visual here. That this visual is confirming to the American people that there was some kind of organization And they are in fear now, just like back in 1957 when it was confirmed to the American people. Yes, there is a criminal organization nationwide. And no matter what the FBI said back then, now we're on a whole new level. And of course, after that, the FBI had to admit it. My question today is, now that the people are awoken, is the FBI going to admit that there is a deep state, a secret organization that is not elected? They live in the shadows and they pull the strings and they divvy up the loot. I think that's what really pisses off the American people. How the Obamas and the Clintons and all these people who are supposed to be public servants, but somehow have millions and millions of dollars in the bank, live in $1 million homes. I mean, but you're not supposed to talk about it. And you're not supposed to research them. And if you're the neighbor, if you live next door to these public servants in these $1 million mansions, you have to keep your mouth shut. The bottom line is, Americans are not stupid. The Clintons never had a real job in their life. The Obamas never had a real job in their entire life, and yet they're millionaires. I mean, if that's not the evidence of a criminal organization, I mean, why is it that the Clinton Crime Foundation is not being investigated? Or more specifically, why did it take so long for there to be a real investigation? And is that investigation really going on like they tell us? Sometimes I wonder if it's just not all smoke and mirrors. They tell us that there's a bunch of whistleblowers from the Clinton Foundation, and there's over 6,000 pages of evidence. And they tell us there's an ongoing investigation, which will probably last until Hillary's well into her 90s. I mean, that's how long old man Bush lasted. Bush lasted into his 90s, and there was no investigation into Bush Sr. So that might be some good news, that at least there's a somewhat of an investigation, even if it's a fake investigation going on into the Clinton Foundation. Which brings me up to another interesting point. How big is this organization? We're talking about the deep state mafiosi. I mean, how many dons are there in that organization? And not only capos, but how about captains and soldiers? I mean, there in 1957, in upstate New York, there was over 100 mafiosi that attended the meeting from the United States, Italy, and Cuba. And I don't care if you say Appalachian or Appalachian, or I don't care how you say it, because the Cuban mafiosi in attendance, I think they called it the Siberian Hicksville. But I mentioned that because everybody says, it's not Appalachian, it's Appalachian. And where the hell are you from, bravo, blah, blah. I get that all the time. But let's bring up some of the names of the Dons in these families. I mean, you're talking about the Genoveses, the Gambinos, the Bravos, the Corleones. You had Big Paul Castellano. You had Don Carlo Gambino. You had Santo Traficante Jr. there. You had Don Vito Genovese. I mean, you had all these Dons. I mean, today, the names have changed, but human nature, greed, never does. I mean, now you have the Clinton crime family and the Bush crime family. Only the names have changed. Like I said, the greed will always be there, because that's why they sell us down the river. For personal gain, money, power, and greed. And then you had old Frank Costello. Yeah, he was a doozy. You might be surprised to know this. I think I only did maybe one book report in my entire career in public schools. And you know who I did that book report on? Yeah, Frank Costello. I found a book on him. And that was my book report I did in, I think it was maybe junior high or high school, on Frank Costello. So my profiling of these criminals go way, way back, if that tells you anything. What do you got here? You got Fat Tony Salerno. And of course, Fat Tony was represented by Roy Cohn. We might get into him later. Fat Tony Salerno in the middle there. He also, well, he had communications with Steve Wynn. Now, we're talking about casinos now. So it's no coincidence that Fat Tony Salerno had communications with Steve Wynn, or maybe were they orders to Steve Wynn. And Donald Trump was in the casino business. And Roy Cohn is the handler. Well, not to change the subject, but talking about handlers, I think it was lucky for Hillary Clinton that her dad did not have a vowel on the end of his last name, and he was not invited to the big meeting up there, upstate New York in 1957. He had to stay in Chicago and do the grunt work. Yeah, you're talking about the capos, the captains, and the grunts, the soldiers. We're talking about an organization here, aren't we? And back in the 50s and 60s, who was the lawyer, handler for these wise guys? None other than Roy Cohn. And I mean, not to be sarcastic or anything, but all you QAnon researchers out there who connect the dots. I mean, I hear you Bible thumpers are pretty good at reading the writing on the wall, if you know where that came from. I mean, why don't we do a little bit of profiling into their MO, their SOP, standard operating procedure of the 666 gang? They study the demographics of America. They study the unwashed masses because we are the commodity. We are the product, not only to be sold, but to be sold to. So the elite 666 gang who control all the money and all the important assets, they must analyze our comments and our views to understand what to sell to you. Put simply, what will we buy? The people, the unwashed masses, what will we accept as they throw it down our throat? They think that they have to analyze this, the 666 gang. What will the people accept? I mean, it was easy to buy Donald Trump, wasn't it? When the alternative was the crooked, sleazy Clintons. The Clinton Crime Foundation. Who in the hell wants the Clinton Crime Foundation to steal any more loot from the American people? Nobody wanted that. So the American people gambled on a racehorse with no previous races. I mean, we're talking about an unknown commodity here, a non-career politician. And many people think that maybe I've been rambling for a few minutes. But no, I'm trying to get to a point here. You can believe, and you can believe with your entire soul, that the 666 gang is very confused now. I did not say they're out of control. No, whoever prints the money is in control, but they're confused. So I was not rambling about the 666 gang studying demographics, studying us. This video, the last two videos I made on this subject, part one, part two, all those comments, we've been through this before. It's very, very important for the 666 gang to analyze the comments, analyze our views, because they need to know what to sell us. They need to know what we will accept, what we will buy. Of course, we're talking a political horse race here. I mean, the races never end. Pretty soon it'll be 2020. There'll be another race. There'll be another race. What horse will they buy? I'm not talking the big one. I'm not talking about the one for the Oval Office. I mean, how many smaller ones are there? Smaller races. What horse will they buy? And they have to market that horse to you through the corporate mainstream media. And the field is muddy right now. It's a muddy, muddy field, and it's not easy to handicap. So, again, remember what we're talking about, the 666 gang. We're going way, way above these people you see in the pictures now. Way above the capos. Way above the political heads. And the 666 gang, they are looking for non-career politicians to put in the race because the long shot Trump won. And now the 666 gang has to readjust their handicapping skills to find a shill or a horse to sell to the Americans. Think like that new guy down in Texas who almost beat Cruz. Think, what's her name? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. New horses. Non-career politicians. Yes, it is true that we have witnessed a divine accident. And thank you, Orson Welles, for teaching us. That's what makes great movies. That's what makes great films. So just to make it clear here, the mafia dons are not in charge. The 666 gang who can print money out of thin air are in charge. Just to make it clear here, the politicians are not in charge. The 666 gang is. And the Federal Reserve banking cartel is a tool. Nothing more than a tool. And the craftsmen who own that tool, again, they are the 666 gang. They own everything. They have all the money. They own all the important assets. Back after the dot-com bubble collapsed, trillions of dollars left America. Yes, that was part of the dot-com collapse. The first bubble that bust, trillions of dollars left America, went over to Asia. And I'm not going to go into the story of why the housing bubble was blew up, but I must make it perfectly clear who's in charge here. And it's not you or I. But nevertheless, you and I may not be in charge, but 350 million Americans cannot be ignored. Just like back in 1957 when they were up there in upstate New York, divvying up all the stolen loot. I will end this conversation like I have ended many, many times before. Some of you may even remember this. What do the American people want? I tell you that the American people want half of the stolen loot back. That's all we want, is half of the stolen loot. And we will then let you have free passage to wherever. You fill in the blanks. But you will give back to the American people at least, and I say at least, half of the stolen loot that you have stolen.